Welcome to the Reasons to Reason podcast. I'm your host and captain, Sal Galati. This is the show that's going to talk about all the things we're not supposed to: God, religion, and politics. So strap in, prepare to get offended, and maybe, just maybe, our nation can learn how to reason again. Thanks for joining us for another episode. I think we've got a fun one here. Could be very informational for a lot of you. Maybe consider doing something you never thought before, which the topic is homeschooling. And I have three guests, and I'll introduce them here as I go. First, I'll talk about my personal exposure to homeschooling. If you would have told me 10, 15 years ago we'd be homeschooling our kids, I never would have thought that in a million years. But since meeting several families doing it, meeting their children, things I noticed were how articulate they were, how when they spoke to you, they looked you in the eye. I really started to really value what the benefits were to taking this direction in our education of our kids. As I become more aware and have started to understand my faith more and more, I also noticed that I was very sensitive to the religions that were being taught in the schools. And I spoke about that in the episode, Marx's Lie versus Jesus' Truth, primarily the Darwinian evolutionary model. And I've spoken about how, the real scientists in that arena have already moved on from that model. Whether it be origin, they have no idea how it started, but even some of the things that they assumed were true as far as how kinds evolved into different kinds, they're not seeing the evidence. They're kind of moving off that model. They're not necessarily going to God, but they know they have to do something different. And my observation is how tragic. I mean, I believe it's true that we're made in the image of God, but if that is true and we're teaching the children something else, no wonder there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of depression in our youth. And it just started making me think about how I wanted to take a different approach. My wife, Liz Galati, is a guest, and she'll speak to her experience. We have another guest, Rachel Holler, and she was someone that we met that really helped us understand kind of a curriculum that we got real comfortable with. And one thing she explained to me that really resonated was education model is really set on putting the child in the center, whereas the curriculum we've adopted puts God at the center. And really the whole basis of education is the knowing and understanding of God, His ways, His creation, and in doing so, understanding our value, how we work in that creation that He gave us to steward over. And I just thought that was so much more of a healthy way to educate the kids. One thing I want to point out, we're very aware this is not for every family. It requires a lot of time commitment, but we know because of work and different things, this isn't a fit for everyone. So we didn't want anyone to feel like we were knocking if you're not going down this path, but if you are able, we wanted to expose you to it. Our final guest is Jen Burns, who is head of the Classical Consortium Academy, and we brought her on because she's going to be opening up a new chapter in Glenview that we're going to be part of, and we're really excited about it. And this is, I say it's the best of both worlds, where you have a group learning environment with teachers, and then you have the homeschool. And that'll be twice a week in class, 3 times a week at home. And really, learning is a lifelong and an everyday experience, as we've learned as our families have been exposed to this. So without further ado, Liz, would you like to start us off?
We have been homeschooling now for 3 years, and there are still some days that I feel very overwhelmed, but I am so thankful that we have the opportunity to homeschool. My first thoughts about that was absolutely not. I would never homeschool my kids. I can't wait for them to go to school so I can have a quiet house. But wow, my whole thought process has really changed on that. Just being able to spend so much time with my kids. It's been such a blessing. And we really were introduced to this whole idea by our good friend, Rachel Holler.
Hello, my name is Rachel Holler. I've been a homeschool mom now for about 14 years. I started homeschooling my 4 children years ago. It was something that wasn't as foreign to me because I had been homeschooled my whole life. So I had that kind of going for me in terms of that wasn't necessarily an anxiety. I had been a successful product, thank the Lord. But I definitely immediately jumped into community. For me, I know one of the biggest drawbacks is for a lot of people who are unfamiliar with it is they think they're an island unto themselves. There's a lot of anxiety of being kind of alone versus in community with other families within a school system. So in terms of what I feel like the drawbacks or the things that people are most fearful of when they start out is being alone, feeling that they're inadequate because they don't have some degree in education, and maybe just self-doubt overall, just kind of like not feeling they're equipped. And that maybe goes back to not having a degree, so to speak, in education. So I would just encourage anyone who is even be a little bit of a interest in it is to try to get rid of all those preconceived thoughts in their head or fears, or hurdles, right? What are the things that they need to eliminate as like a drawback or as something that they should be worried about? And I'd say that, and maybe you ladies can help me speak to this, but I think it is important to be united as a family. I think that's the main thing. I think all the other ones can kind of be dealt with, but make sure that you and your spouse are kind of on the same page with that. I think that is an important thing when you're launching, because it is a sacrifice. It is a dynamic in the home that you do have to consider. And so I think that that is one thing that I would really encourage. Make sure you're on the same page and united in that front. But everything else, you know your kids in a way that no one else will.
I wanted to add something there. One thing that we've heard over and over again is trust the experts. And you want to, like, how could I educate my kid? I didn't go to school to educate my kid. But especially in the elementary stages, you're not teaching them rocket science. Who's a better expert, your child, and how to teach them than yourself, than the parents? You have a room of 30 kids, and God bless the teachers that are trying to do it, but to try to tailor the education to one of those 30 kids, it's really difficult. And that was just an insightful thing that happened as I was kind of considering homeschooling. But I'm going to give it to Jen to speak.
Sure, the Lord equips you for every good work, doesn't he? So my name is Jennifer Burns. I'm the mom of 3, 26, 22, and 16, and I've been homeschooling for 22 years. And so it was daunting for sure, but I really believed that children are capable of doing so much more than what the world says they can. And so that was really my driver. I connected with my oldest at that time over education, and I knew that he was capable of so much more than what the system was saying that he could do. So left my job that I loved and decided to stay home and homeschool him. In the process, the Lord really called me to see what was missing in the homeschool community at that time. And you're right, it is community, right? Doing that together. And so I created a program called Heart, which was an enrichment program that helped homeschooling parents round out their education for their children instead of car schooling them to try to give them all of the extras to round out that education. And then it was within that year of creating Heart that the Lord called me to create a program where He was the foundation of all, and that support of homeschooling families, because it is daunting to do that work, right? Take on that full responsibility, especially when we've been programmed to think that it is the institution that is designed best to school our children. And what COVID helped us see is that that institution might not be the best institution for our kiddos. And so 20 years ago, he called me to create Classical Consortium Academy so that parents can be helped to give their children the kind of education that they desire.
A couple of things, just speaking as a dad, family trips. We're not on the schedule of all the other families with vacation and stuff, and we've been able to do and see some really cool things when other people aren't there. And overall, what is that pointing to? The amount of time we're spending together. I am so grateful. Everyone says it goes by fast, it goes by fast. I'm already sensing it goes by fast. My oldest is only 10. But I'm just so grateful for all the memories we've had, the conversations we had. I've put it on myself to be the history teacher, so go through this history book. I'm learning a ton. The conversations we have now that we never would have had if I didn't have the opportunity to spend so much time with them, that is just a blessing that I'll share as a father.
I would, speak to that same point, how much really homeschooling, one of the greatest benefits, other than keeping the Lord as the center of our home, has been the relationships I built with my kids. Again, my older kids are in school now, but that foundation that we made as a family and the closeness that we established, I don't think that would have been possible without homeschooling. My kids and I and my husband, we are so close, and the conversations, just like Sal said, that we've been able to have, and the openness and the closeness that we have, for me, has been the most important thing that I wouldn't trade for anything.
And the relationship with your children, with each other, which I think is so sweet. I've got 3 boys who have a span of 10 years from my oldest to my youngest. And to be able to see these beautiful relationships being fostered between them that really, they might not even really know each other if they were in school.
Yeah, same. I would say 3 boys, kind of a little closer in age, but same. I love how they don't even really ask to necessarily see friends all the time. They're not so peer dependent. They just have this beautiful relationship. And through this Christmas break, I would just sit back and listen to them playing games together, talking, laughing. And there's just such a peace there and such a beauty. And again, I think without that time with them together, learning together, the one-room schoolhouse, it's just beautiful connection and woven together in a way that you just saw the fruit of that in so many other ways, just not just academically, which I think actually benefited them, kind of hearing and being together, learning at different grades, but also drawing from what their older siblings were learning. The relationship and the academic growth that came out of that was pretty special.
I want to step in here with one thing. I don't want it to sound like we're knocking families that don't go down this path. We're just families that have been blessed by it, and we want to share it with people, and we just want to get people past the arbitrary hurdle. And just check out, Jen's going to talk about some information sessions she's going to have in the upcoming weeks to just check it out, be open to it. You know, it's one of those things too, we were talking about it earlier before the show, how you don't know any homeschool families and then all of a sudden you know a ton of homeschool families. There's just a lot more of those families, and we call, like, Jen's like an original gangster is what I call them. Like when they were doing it 20 years ago where no one was doing it. Now there's just so much more resources, support, and I've been so grateful for all the familial relationships we've had now, right? We get together for meals often. These are our friends now, and we're aligned in so many things, and we're just have the same vision of what our children's education is, and I'm just grateful for that.
I think a lot of the new homeschooling families are doing it out of a reaction to what they've experienced. You know, they've been in a system that sadly is not, again, of no fault of teachers themselves, but the system, the way it's created, unfortunately is not teaching their students all the things that parents were expecting their children to know. And that's proven out in the nation's report card, where you see students in only teens, 15%, 18%, being able to read at grade level, or do math at grade level, or understand civics at grade level. And so the system is failing our students from that perspective. And then parents are also recognizing that the system is introducing their children to things that they really don't want the system to introduce them to. Parents are running away from that. But what I like to talk to parents about is what kind of education you should be running toward for your children. And that's one where God is, in fact, at the center. It's one that is really focused on creating these young men and young women who will have dominion over the earth, right? They're God's nobility, his vice regents. And so we need to be training up our children to be that. And that's the kind of education that our children are worthy of, a kind of education where he's at the center, because we need to be training up disciples of him.
Right. I moved into a nice suburb thinking, you know, the taxes are insane, but I'm like, okay, well, the schools are good. You just hear the schools are good, the schools are good. And again, I'm not knocking the schools. For some families it works. We're just kind of talking in general. But as Jen pointed out, the report card's not good. And even since COVID, we haven't really recovered as far as just some basic things. The things that they should be focusing on, arithmetic, science, composition, that's taken a backseat, and we're amplifying other things that really should be handled at the home. And I didn't want the state established religion dictating what my kids' views were. And, you know, again, many families don't have that opportunity to get involved to the extent that we are with our children's education. But if it's something that's doable, I'm just suggesting to people to consider it.
Well, a lot more people can actually homeschool than think they can. I can't tell you how many people, and I'm sure you ladies can attest to this, how many people have said, oh my goodness, you must be a saint to homeschool, or, oh, I could never homeschool. And I tell all of those people, yes, you can. You know, you can. And I understand that there are situations where both mom and dad need to work, and so there might not be a financial way that you can do it. But more people than not talk about, oh, emotionally I couldn't, or, oh, I'm not a teacher. And what they don't understand is that really God does equip you for that. And you don't need to be a credentialed or degreed teacher. It's really learning right alongside of your student And there's great resources out there, including great curricula and curriculum resources, but there's also really great programs out there that can walk alongside of you and give you the community that you need, give you the accountability and structure that you need. And Classical Consortium Academy is just one of many opportunities out there.
As we're kind of trying to highlight Jen's program, I really was thinking about the classical model and wanting to just think that it might be good for Jen to maybe highlight some of the aspects of classical education, because I think if you were going to partake in this kind of program, it is good to educate yourself on the classical model to kind of have an idea of what that even means, because we've gotten pretty far away from the classical model, I would say, in most education systems.
So this is something like where, we had a style of educating for a long time, and then just recently, relatively recently, we've changed. Sometimes if the thing isn't broke, don't fix it. And we look back at how the things were done 100 years ago, and we think they were foolish back then, but it produced a lot of intelligent people. I talked about Washington and some of his writings, and to think how articulate these men were, and women. I'm not just saying men, just he happened to be a man, but to think like if any of our politicians could speak as eloquently, as thoughtful, be as such a visionary, well-rounded as him, and yet he's like yesterday's news, garbage. We've evolved beyond him. So Jen, this is a great opportunity for you to, like Rachel said, talk about the classical model, talk about what your vision is for what we're going to be doing in Glenview, talk about the success that you've already experienced in Barrington, and I'll let you take it from here.
So I think it needs to start about what our purpose is. And so as Christians, our purpose is to know God, glorify Him, and enjoy Him forever. And so that has to be the purpose of education, is to teach our kids about who God is, who they are in light of Him, and how they are to know Him and enjoy Him. And so this classical Christian kind of philosophy of education is focused on just that. And you're right, this is how our founding fathers were educated, and many people, greatest thinkers throughout history, were educated in this way, really to be Renaissance men and women who have this well-rounded, good liberal arts education that's first and foremost founded on God and His Word, founded on the great works of literature that are seminal in our country, the documents that help form our country.
And one thing, we talked about, even if you don't believe the Bible to be true, in these classics, we have to understand these classics, because some of the more recent writings we're reading and studying, let's just say our Constitution, were grounded in things that these men learned in reading those books. So if you don't have an understanding of what the Bible says, how are you going to understand what the intent of the Constitution is, for example? We saw in Texas, they've now made the Bible part of the curriculum. And again, it's not about pushing a religion. It's not about pushing a worldview. It's about understanding the bedrock of the society we live in. How can we understand the laws of this nation if we don't understand those documents? And a final point, you mentioned civics and the founding fathers, how they were educated. One of the basic reasons why they felt that there needed to be a public education system, which originally wasn't part of the deal, was to teach the society on basic civics. Because if the population was ignorant on those things, we would lose the republic. We would lose our freedom. And sadly, probably one of the things less taught about in school is probably that very thing. And we've replaced it with a bunch of pseudosciences and feelings and all this other stuff that we've been talking about. So sorry to interrupt.
No, we have to get educated on civics and really how to be people who can reason well, who can communicate clearly. And that's really what a classical education is designed to do. It's founded on something called the trivium, which is really the three major liberal arts: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. But the idea here is that children develop in a particular way, and that development should guide what we teach students, when we should teach them, and how we should teach them those subjects. And so it is this understanding of what children need in order to be ones who can think and communicate clearly. and really recognize what is good, true, and beautiful. And that's essential. And that's what's been, I think, taken out of our more progressive education, that's simply focused on what can this subject do for me? What kind of job can it equip me for? Instead of thinking about subjects in a way of what do they do to me? What does the study of cursive do to me in helping me recognize what is beautiful or helping me be patient? What does the study of history do to me in my understanding of his grand story? What does the study of math or God's order of things do for me? And so that is, it's about what it does to you and how it transforms you and your soul as you're studying it and your understanding of who God is. And that's been removed from a traditional education system.
I mean, if we look at all the universities in the nation, for example, all these institutions, almost all of them were founded by believers in God with the pursuit of the university to study different areas of thought, to pursue and understand God. And they've been hijacked by a secular view, and it's just, what are the ramifications if we don't keep God as the focus? And we use that word progressive, but C.S. Lewis had a famous quote about everyone's walking off a cliff. The most progressive one's the one that turns around. And I think we're at that point. We got the report card out of schools, check. The children aren't well psychologically. They're struggling. What the cause of that is, we could debate and discuss. I think that we're seeing these things because we've removed God from the situation.
And that classical education that was the bedrock of the kind of education our founding fathers received here in our founding of our country, that was turned away from because it is a challenging kind of education to give. It is one that is founded on lots of reading and lots of writing, and that is a really hard philosophy of education to deliver when you've got kids packed in a classroom. It takes time. It takes time to digest these things, to think about these things deeply, and to execute on this and really train students up to do it and do it well. But it is in fact that laborious process of learning that make you the kind of virtuous human that is required for a thriving society. And that's what we're really getting back to here in this classical education, is teaching these young people honestly how to do hard things over and over and over again, so that they feel equipped both academically and intellectually, but also emotionally equipped to handle the ups and downs of life. And that's what a good quality education does for you. It equips you academically, but then also gives you the courage to do the hard things of learning complex things past high school, and going forward in doing the hard things of just being a human.
I'll speak to my personal experience. I've learned more in my life post my education career, post my undergraduate degree in finance at University of Illinois. What I'm encouraged by with the homeschool model is I have the ability to put in the thirst for knowledge into my kids that I had as a young person, but I didn't have to the level I have now. We were just watching a movie last night. With Honors was the name of the movie. We both looked at each other and said, man, I really wasted my time in college. The amount of opportunities I could have had to have conversation with interesting people from diverse backgrounds with intellect in different areas. And I spent it doing what?
Absolutely. I find so much joy in relearning things that I did not appreciate. So a new appreciation for history and writing, all the things that I didn't truly appreciate. So a love of learning, I think, is a big thing for them. And maybe Jen could help me articulate this, but when you're talking about the rigor of a classical model, which still involves a lot of hard work, but I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of kids today, maybe they're smart enough to pick up on the fact that a lot of their education is to just get to the next standardized test, right? There's kind of this level of expectation that you're going to just show us results on a test that then is going to be quickly forgotten. And I guess what I feel like with classical is kids maybe even intuitively understand that the goal of what they're learning, though it be hard, is for something way more worthy and beautiful and will carry them through life and help them appreciate something.
Yeah, one thing that was explained to me by Rachel when we started this was, and it worked in my mind, setting up islands of information when they're young, and then you kind of build the roads connecting them all. And again, it's about a building project, start to finish, not just isolated projects that once you're done and you pass the test, you throw that away because you could cram the next amount of information is. That it's cohesive, that it's coherent, that it builds upon each other. And of course it does, because we're studying God. He's consistent, He's coherent, He's truth.
I just wanted to say one thing that I'm excited about this CCA, Classical Consortium Academy. We're in our third year homeschooling. I'm excited for a different step in structure. I'm excited for more structure. Our oldest is going to be in 6th grade. She's approaching some different topics, some different way of learning and different type of studying. And I'm excited that I have the opportunity to have her go learn with a classroom of her age and other teachers besides myself 2 days a week, and then get to go through her homework with her at home the other 3 days. I'm very excited for that structure, a difference in just being home and meeting with our homeschool group 1 day a week.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue to Jen to wrap up our episode here, to tell us exactly about what your vision is here in Glenview, what it's going to look like briefly. Talk about some of the informational sessions you got coming up for people that are intrigued by this conversation to come check out a little bit more about it.
Excellent, thank you. So Classical Consortium Academy was established almost 20 years ago at the beginning of the resurgence of classical education here in the U.S. And really before this whole hybrid idea was popular. Now it is more popular, and there's lots of different hybrid programs out there. But the idea is that there's such goodness that comes from being a homeschool family, as we've talked about a lot today. But there's also really good stuff that comes from a corporate learning environment, learning from teachers who can pour into your kids, learning around students who can sharpen your student. That's all good. And having that hand-holding and accountability, so giving parents the confidence that they need to go through the homeschooling journey and do it together in community. So Classical Consortium Academy is the original program, was created at the Village Church of Barrington in Barrington, Illinois, and that's been thriving, but we are busting at the seams. And so we're so blessed to partner with Cornerstone Church in Glenview to open up a second campus during the 2025-26 school year. We're super excited about that. We're opening with K through 8th, and we have informational meetings coming up in January, February, and March. You can go to classicalconsortiumacademy.org to learn more about Classical Consortium Academy, as well as our informational meetings that are coming up in Glenview.
Great, and I'll put all that in the show notes. Hey, ladies, thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing concerns. I think a lot of people will be blessed by that convo. You said earlier when moms say, I can't believe I couldn't do that. I'd imagine every homeschool mom said that. And to the dads out there, they need a lot of support with it, obviously, and I'm making the assumption that the dad's the one out. It could be the other way around, and the dad's taking the lead. We have some dads that take the lead in education at our current group, but keep your mind open to it. Here's a guy that never thought in a million years, and I'm just been so blessed by the whole process and getting to know my kids. Jen, I'll leave you with the last word.
I have never met a homeschooling family who has regretted the decision. It is such a blessing to spend that kind of time with your children. And it's something that will grow your family closer together. So one more thing, I had a health scare about 10 years ago, and the first thing that I thought of is that I spent my time well, that spending that time with my children, homeschooling them, was the best choice I could have made to pour into them and be their major influence. And so I would highly encourage everyone to spend this sweet, precious time with their children, pouring into them the way God intended.
So grateful for the conversation, so grateful for that testimony and sharing that story with us. I think that's powerful. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us for another episode. I hope I got you thinking and out of your comfort zone. Believe me, the biggest fear your government has is a population that is thinking and talking to one another. So get out there, take a risk, start a conversation, make a friend, and reason with each other. Share the show with someone who you think needs to hear it. I wish you peace and love.